What would be a good place to start? I really want to hear more about your travel experiences because we kind of half dived into it yesterday, and it was like such a cliffhanger. And I'm like all week I've
Yeah.
been like, I just need to know what happened, like how you felt. So do you want to go back to the
Yeah.
beginning? Start with like what your sort of traveling experiences were and all that.
Yeah. So I took a one-way flight to India the very beginning of January 2020, before I'd even heard of COVID, before anyone had heard of COVID. Um, and I'd been planning it for a long time. I'd had it in my mind to go to India for a long time. It's been a place that I've really wanted to visit for years and years, kind of since I can remember, since kind of being a child. Um, yeah, so took the flight, turned up in India, had a great kind of 3 months ish, 2 to 3 months where I was traveling around, um, doing kind of the things I'd planned, but I didn't have that many plans. Just kind of was starting in the very south of India in the state called Kerala, and then kind of was slowly working north, and then ended up in a place called Rishikesh, which is quite famous for yoga. It's like a big yoga place. It's quite touristy.
Mm.
It's just full of yoga schools and stuff. It's on the river Ganga or Ganges. It's like super holy place in India. And then got locked down. So that was kind of mid to end of March. Um, yeah, and then was stuck for about 4 months. We didn't get a flight until July, so I went there on my own. Um, didn't really meet too many people compared to my previous kind of solo trips actually in India, or at least not to travel with because it's such a big country and yeah, people are going
Mm.
here, there, and everywhere. It's not like Southeast Asia, for example, where everyone's kind of doing a loop either one way or the other way, and you kind of naturally can
Mm.
travel. But I think I turned up to the hostel in Rishikesh maybe 3 or 4 days before the lockdown, and in the bunk bed next to me was this Finnish guy called Leo, and we ended up both getting locked down together. There was a few other people in the hostel, but it wasn't like a busy hostel. And then yeah, we're locked down
Mm.
for 4 months together, and then decided that actually we kind of wanted to stick together even longer. Even 4 months stuck together, kind of 24 hours a day, apparently wasn't enough. Um,
Proven,
yeah, so we
proven to work.
yeah, so we got the first flight available that we could both go on because the flight situation, there was basically zero flights, and the very few flights there were to Europe, you had to be from that country to get on a flight. So I
Mm.
couldn't have taken a flight to anywhere else but England, and there was zero flights to Finland. So Leo was completely stuck. And even the flights to England, they were very few and very expensive. The first kind of
Mm.
available flight was this one to Germany. So we went there, had a plan that we were going to cycle around. We really just wanted some freedom. Leo had cycled around like New Zealand before with like a tent. I'd never done anything like that. I could barely ride a bike, like, and I'm not exaggerating. Like, I fell off that bike so many times in the first few weeks. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. Um, but yeah, we really enjoyed the freedom. So we were cycling around, camping, um, yeah, and did that until the weather started to get colder, and then did some volunteering first in Slovenia, and then went to Austria so that we could earn some money because money was running a little bit low at that point. So we, yeah,
Mm.
used our bikes that we had and kind of did the Austrian version of Deliveroo in Austria from, I don't know, about November time till April the next year. So quite a long time we were there. And actually, we volunteered in Austria before we got that job, actually, because you needed to have like a place of residence to like register and be able to work there. And I got in just before
Yeah,
all the Brexit stuff was completely fine, or like November, and then come
yeah.
January, you couldn't work in the EU anymore,
Brexit,
just
yeah.
turn up and work. So yeah, I managed to get in just before that, which was
Damn.
really handy. Yeah, and then April came around, we were eager to go. I was really, really homesick by this point. I've like never been homesick in my life, but by the time that we were in Austria, I was pretty homesick. And not being able to come home just made that even worse. So yeah, we kind of formed a vague plan that we would cycle back to the UK, and that's what we did. So through Croatia, through Italy, through France, and then yeah, back home and spent some time with my mum. And when we got bored of that, we cycled up to Scotland. So the cycling wasn't done. Did some volunteering there, and then yeah, bought a little tiny camper van in Scotland and drove ourselves to Ireland because yeah, then it was the winter again, and we didn't fancy cycling in the winter. Um, Again, kind of for money reasons, we needed to yeah get over to Ireland so that Leo could work and I could also work. Being from me from
Mm.
England and Leo from the EU, Ireland is like basically the only place, or like the very easiest place that we could both work. So that's why we ended up here.
Damn. That sounds like such an intense experience. Like there's so many like different things, especially thinking like COVID happened, then Brexit happened, and all these rules and regulations, and how much it changed,
Yeah,
and being in different countries. Like here in the UK, we're like, oh, Brexit, COVID lockdowns are happening. Like we've got to stay in, we've got to wear masks. But like
mm,
you're looking at India ones, you're looking at Finnish ones, Germany ones. Like you're literally looking worldwide to
yeah,
try and figure out like yeah, that's a lot to unpick. I think we'll start at the beginning because I'm really interested to
yeah.
think like what was it about travel that appealed to you in the first place? Like what was that drive?
I think the very first kind of push I had towards travel came when I was really, really young and hearing the stories from my mum and dad, um, who went to Thailand before I was born for about a month, 6 weeks maybe, I'm not quite sure. Yeah, just before I was born. And I used to hear stories about it, and my mum always spoke really fondly of it. Um, Probably the thing that she talked about in the most positive light out of like everything of her past experiences that she ever talked about. And she'd always really encouraged
Mm,
me to see the world and live my life before having kids. That was like something that she like explicitly told me like multiple times as I was growing up. I definitely get the feeling that she wished she
mm,
had a bit more time to travel before she had me. Even though she is insistent that I was planned, she was only 22 when she had me. So yeah, I think that's maybe one of her regrets. And that kind of pushed me, or like got it in
mm,
my mind. I kind of had it in my mind that I was going to go to university. I'd yeah been pretty clever at school, been told by all my family like go to university and get a good job and be rich and you'll be happy. So yeah, so that wasn't even a question. Like I was going to university, but then like the other kind of thing that was certain for me was that afterwards I was going to go traveling to before getting a job. Um, and
mm.
yeah, when I was in sixth form, like my school did this like yearly trip to Gambia, like in it's a country in Africa, a very small one. Um, and we would like raise
Mm.
funds and like bring donations, and then go over there like a group of the sixth form students would go over there and meet with the connections that our school had built over like 20 years. We had a really long standing connection with like a bunch of schools and villages and hospitals and stuff. And I remember hearing about that like when I was younger in the same school. I mean, like, wow, like I definitely want to do that. And I did do that. And that, like, yeah, again, it was like another thing of like, actually, no, I really do like this, going to other places and seeing different
Mm.
cultures and stuff. Um, and then during uni, I went hitchhiking as part of like a uni competition, not competition, like challenge, like fundraising challenge that you were supposed to raise money. Um, and like it was, you were trying to be sponsored to get to Zagreb, like in the fastest time with no money. I don't really know how to explain it. I think it's
That's in
quite a common
Croatia,
thing.
isn't it?
Yeah, in Croatia. So I signed up for that and did that. So hitchhiked from London to Zagreb in about, I don't know, maybe 4 days or something. That was pretty wild. And again was like, actually, yeah, this is
It's intense.
exciting. And then I think it was the summer after my first year of university. I didn't really have any money, but I knew that I didn't want to just be home like for, I don't know, what, 2, 3 months over summer with nothing to do. I
Mm,
didn't want to get a job. I didn't want to work. um, so I found out about this website called Workaway, where you can volunteer for hosts like all around the world. So there's some in England and
mm,
the UK, but also like worldwide. And found an English language school in Morocco, and went there for the summer for like 2 months, as a way to kind of test the water, having it in mind that I was going to travel after I graduated on my own. I knew that I kind of wanted to do it on my own. None of my friends were really into that kind of thing. Um, so I knew I was going to do it alone. So that was like testing the water. I went to this host that had loads of different volunteers at the school, so I kind of knew that I wouldn't be completely alone, and that if I wanted to travel in Morocco,
mm.
that I'd have
Yeah,
some
yeah, that makes
company.
sense.
So it was like a way to ease myself in. And again, I loved it. Morocco is definitely not the easiest place to travel, especially as a woman. But despite all of the kind of challenges that came with that, I loved it, and like the food, the people, and just everything. I loved it. So then when it came to like after graduation, I did my like 4 months in Southeast Asia on my own. And again, like had a great time, had a really really great time. Um, and then when I came back, that's when the kind of like quarter life crisis kicked in, when I'd found myself a job and all of this stuff. Yeah, so I knew even when I started that job, I had in mind like, okay, I'm not going to be in this job forever, and when I quit this job, I'm probably going to go traveling before I get another one, which is what I ended up doing.
That is, it's incredible how many experiences you've had. And I really like how you've done it with almost testing the waters, like doing little bits here and there, obviously going through school and stuff like that, and like building it up and up and up until it gets to a point where you're like, I could literally go to the other side of the world now, to somewhere like India, and I could stay there for a long time, and like I know that I'm capable of doing that. And like that
Yeah.
driving force as well, that kind of hunger for travel. Having traveled myself, I think there's definitely like a bug that once you do it, it doesn't really let go.
Mm.
You're like, oh, I want to do that. Like, I want to do it more. I need to go and visit all these places, which is really nice.
Yeah.
What do you think you've learned from like going to all these places? I know you said you like to like meet the people and the cultures, but like, what do you think it is that really like speaks to you as a person? Like when you go to these places, what makes you feel
Mm.
alive?
You learn a lot about yourself. I think um that's always been the main thing for me. I felt like I wasn't like a completely different person like when I went traveling or anything, but it just gave me that space to be around new people who didn't necessarily have expectations of who I was.
Mm,
Um, and also like the situations that you're put in when you're traveling, especially when you're traveling on your own, you kind of prove to yourself what you're capable of in terms of like bravery and like thinking on your feet and like figure things out and staying calm in like really stressful situations. Um, and I think that was a big thing, especially in the beginning when I was traveling. Because I was very shy, I wasn't a very confident person. Um, I didn't necessarily have that much
mm,
self belief, like in many areas of my life. But when you're just like in crazy situations, like there's no option but to be brave and hopefully stay calm and like not just completely go like crazy, because yeah, you just can't, like you just can't do that. So you kind of prove to yourself that actually no,
mm,
I am capable of all these cool things. And then yeah, on the flip side, you just meet new people, whether it's other travelers that you meet like in hostels or local people, just like different perspectives and finding out about the ways that other people are living their lives, and kind of opening your mind to be like, oh, actually, this stuff that I've been told my whole life, like growing up, of like study well and work hard and be rich and then you'll be happy. Like, because I kind of knew at least by the time I got to university, I knew that I didn't want to work in a fancy office job that was well paying if it was going to mean that it was like high stress and not something
Mm,
I was passionate about. Um, so then through travel, I was like, oh, this person's doing this cool thing, and like that sounds amazing, and like you just get all these ideas of like what's possible to do in life, and half of them you probably never even heard of or considered before. So
mm.
I really like that. And then like another
Yeah,
big
that's
one
true.
is food. Like like trying the different foods is like one of the best things for me.
I would 100% agree with that, especially going to like all the like the different continents that you've been to. There must be such a like variety of things, especially India. Like must have taken some like getting used to
Mhm.
from and Morocco as well. And I said I've been to Morocco. That definitely took a few days to get
Mhm.
used to, like the street food and stuff for sure.
Yeah.
That's
But
cool. I
the
really like that.
Moroccan
Do you
street
think that's a
food was
common thing,
amazing.
especially in It's so good. It's so good when you get you. It's kind of gross when you see what they do. I remember going to like past one of them in Marrakesh, like the old city markets. It's like the really popular markets, and they have like bits of meat out like on the side. It's not like refrigerated. It's just there, like ready to be cooked. And I'm like, wow, that like in the UK that is not flying, and it feels really weird, but it's fine after like a couple of days. Like you'll do fine. But yeah, it definitely has like
Yeah.
a teething period, for sure.
Mhm.
That's nice though. It's interesting what you say about like the go to uni, get a job like mentality, because especially in the UK, that seems to be the the kind of selling point. Like when I was younger and I was in school, I was quite young. Academically, I was fine. Like I was well off, and they were like, "Oh, like I remember that my parents have reminded me many times that they went to a parents' evening. And they were like, "Oh, if you like push Mike in the right way, he'll be able to go to university. He can get a good job and all that kind of stuff." And it definitely, compared to other countries, university is definitely like pushed upon as being the path. What was your like
Mhm.
experience with going through that? Because it sounds like you've kind of been like, I don't want that. I want experiences. I want to like live. I want relationships. I want to see the world rather than, like you said, being in an office block and just grinding your hours for someone else.
Yeah. So for me, like my family, I was the first one to go to university. Like on my dad's side and my mum's side, like um, I was like the smart one of the family. I don't really know why or how that happened or whatever, but I just seem to have a natural ability from really young that I was like clearly pretty smart. And my mum being like her first child, and she was really like, I don't know, being a single mum from very young. Like my mum and my dad split up when I was about two, and my mum had me, who was like, yeah, 2 year old, and my brother, who was about 6 months old. So, and she had like no money. She was a single mum. We were living in a council house. Um, she was unemployed because she had to take care of us. Um, yeah, as we got a bit older, she found like some part-time jobs and stuff, but it was a really big struggle for her growing up. And the same thing with her parents, like they were did a bunch of different jobs, but like nothing well paid or nothing um yeah, like well respected, I guess. Like they were both lorry drivers for a while, and yeah, were often leaving my mum and her sister alone, like for like sometimes days at a time. And the money was pretty tight for them as well. So I think coming from that background, I think it can kind of go one of two ways. Either your family, if you're smart, they might like not look down on you, but like judge you of like, oh, you think you're better than us, and like, oh, who do you think you are going to university? It can kind of go that way, or it can go the way that it did in my family, where it was seen as like studying at university will allow you to get a well-paying job and you will have a better life than we've had. And that was definitely the opinion of all of my family. It was like, you're really smart, you've got a chance to like break out of this and get yourself qualified in something and be rich, and then you'll be happy and life will be great and you'll be amazing and everything will be perfect. um and when it's like, so the security, yeah, a big thing is the security. And yeah, so that's the kind of message I had when I was growing up from my family. And when I was young, I kind of knew I was going to go to university before I knew what university even was. Does that make sense? Like there was all this talk of, I don't know, university from such a young age. I didn't actually understand what university was. So yeah, it was kind of inevitable that I was going to go. And yeah, I just kind of knew I was good at maths. Maths was like always my kind of strongest subject. And at like 16, I was researching like well-paid maths jobs, and the job of an actuary, which is the person who calculates how much you need to pay for your insurance or your pension or that kind of a thing. It came up as being one of the best paid jobs. Yeah, it is in finance, but it's quite specific. Um, yeah, that came up, and I was like, I'm going to be an actuary. That sounds great. I'm good at maths. I'll be able to do it. I ended up going to university to study actuarial science. So yeah, it leads straight into being an actuary.
So you're saying about values, they were all going for prestige, money, and status, which is, we all know people in that sort of situation, especially if you're not that kind of person. It can feel very, or I can imagine it can feel very, very isolating almost, especially when you've come from a place where there's no money and it's like a bit of a, um, like a low, I say low standard of living, but like from a financial standpoint, where it was like struggling. You've gone into this place and it's like the opposite of like, it's kind of like greed and power grabbing and stuff like that. So it must have, like you said, it must be frustrating to have waited to get into that position to then be like, oh great, it's like the opposite end of the spectrum now.
I don't know when it was exactly. Maybe it was literally when I turned up to university and suddenly like everyone there was wanting status and power and money and all of this stuff. Maybe it was like then, but like even when I was still living at home and I decided I wanted to be an actuary, like I wrote to Ernst and Young asking for like, can I just come in for a day and like see what's up? Like so I was going for that like not that long ago, but I think maybe being surrounded by everyone and the way they were kind of interacting, people were interacting with each other, and it being so competitive and like not, it wasn't really a supportive environment at all. It wasn't anyone saying like, oh, like where have you applied to, like in a supportive way. It was more like, oh, where have you applied to, like am I doing better than you, or like have I applied to more places than you, or it just was not in a supportive tone at all, the kind of conversations. And yeah, yeah, so it just didn't feel good. And like not only all of that, but because like being an actuary is like it's quite an unknown profession in the UK, like to the general population. It's not like a standard. Yeah, I mean most people that I've spoken to, um, they have no idea what it is. Like none of my family had ever heard of it. When I told them I wanted to be an actuary, they're like, "What are you talking about?" Um, yeah. So when I and there's about maybe 3 or 4 universities in the whole of the UK that offer actuarial science as like an explicit degree. Most of the time, maybe you'll do a math degree and you'll be able to get like some kind of modules towards being an actuary. So yeah, it's not well known. Um, and LSE, the university that I went to, I mean, it's one of the reasons why it was full of people wanting to go into finances because it's literally it specializes in economics. Um, but it's really, really popular with foreign students. I think there's more international students at LSE than there are UK students. And on my course of about 60 that year that I was in, I was the only white person. Like everyone else was from Asia on the whole, like China, Singapore, Malaysia, like that's where everyone was from. So I kind of like had that, and like I didn't really make too many friends within my course. I made a couple, one of whom I'm still really good friends with, even now, but not too many. So most of the friends I had I made in halls. Um, yeah, so I did make some friends, and I wasn't like completely isolated. Like some of the people in my halls were, yeah, totally not about finance or whatever. They were just also just looking to kind of, especially in the first year, just have fun more than anything. So that was nice.
Yeah, a little bit more relaxed and uh more going for the experience. It's nice to see the similarities, kind of across the board. Like you said, you want to go for university to have the experience, especially coming from a bit of a rough background, or having a rough childhood. Sorry, and you're like, finally, like I've got to where I want to be. I'm at this position, and it's not where you want to be, and like you're kind of going through the process of realizing, or it sounds like you're going through the process of realizing that experiences and relationships with people are like so much more satisfying than any kind of job or money or prestige or anything like that. I'm sure when you got into university, surely your parents must have been like super proud of you.
Yeah, yeah, my mum was proud, but so the funniest thing is I actually applied to go to Cambridge,
Mm.
um, mainly because it meant that my sixth form would give me extra help with my uni applications. Like if you were applying to Cambridge or Oxford, they like gave you all this extra support because obviously it looks good for the sixth form if their students end up
Yeah,
in
yeah, that's true.
Oxford or Cambridge. Um, and I ended up actually getting an offer, but there was no way I was going to pass the entrance exam that I needed to take to actually get in. So I got an offer, but it was conditional on passing their entry exam.
Yeah,
And because my sixth form was not a fancy one at all, the normally to study maths at university, you would take regular maths as one option and further maths as a second option, and it like goes into much more complicated maths. But I hadn't
yeah,
taken
like a
further
foundation.
maths because they didn't offer it at my sixth form. And
Ah,
without that, I just knew like I looked at the past papers and I was like, there's like zero chance of me passing it. So my mum was actually, if anything, a bit disappointed that I didn't end up going to Cambridge because she likes to brag about me to people, and yeah, she lives vicariously through me a lot of the time. So she was actually a bit annoyed that I didn't get into Cambridge. But honestly, it's the best thing that could have happened because yeah, not only was my eventual experience at LSE very stressful, um, and very hard, and because all of the other students in my course were from China and Singapore and stuff,
mm,
their level of maths was far beyond mine when we entered. So the first year, for almost everyone else in my course, was like revision. It was like they'd already learned everything already back in China or whatever, but it was all new for me. So I was on a real back foot compared to everyone else. I really had to work much harder, even from the first year. And then when it got to the second and then the final year, like I was really, really struggling. And um, yeah, the degree that I applied for in Cambridge was pure maths, and the pure maths is what I found the most difficult in my actual degree. So
mm.
like I think I would have dropped out of Cambridge for sure if I'd have ended up going that, even if by some miracle I'd have got in. So yeah, at least that was like a silver lining with that situation.
It sounds like, especially when you didn't enjoy it either, it's almost like forcing yourself through. Did you manage? Did you manage to graduate? You did graduate and finish the course though. Still,
Yeah, yeah. So luckily, thank God it wasn't for absolutely nothing. That would have been heartbreaking. Yeah. So I graduated with a 2:1. So that's yeah standard. That's what you need. I it was so stressful that final year. Like I was so stressed. I think I was depressed. Honestly, I didn't get diagnosed for it, but looking back, I was like clearly quite severely depressed. Um, and I was in such a panic that I wasn't going to get a 2:1 and that I was going to fail. Because even if you get a 2:2, like in any degree, like to get a kind of good job, most companies are looking for a 2:1. So I was convinced I was going to not get it and that it would all have been for nothing. And I had nightmares for like several years after graduating. And in my nightmares, it would be like the night before my final exam, and I was like, oh my god, like I'm never gonna pass. And I had nightmares like that for years. That's how stressful it was.
understandably so. Like it's a lot of pressure. Is this what tied into your quarter life crisis? Was it around the same time, or like during or after?
Yeah, so the crisis came after. So after I graduated, I had my plan. I was going traveling. Like that was set in stone before I even kind of turned up at university. So I went ahead with that. I had a boyfriend at the time.
Doing
I had
my
a
thing now.
boyfriend. I had a boyfriend all the way through university, so there was a bit of stress with him of like, look, I want to go traveling, I want to go for a few like months. We had to kind of negotiate that. We ended up staying together. But that's a whole nother story of why that wasn't a good idea. But yeah, so I managed to go traveling in Southeast Asia for 4 months. Came back to London, moved in with him again. We got a flat together, and I just needed a job. I kind of thought that in the process of going traveling that I would have at least figured out a little bit kind of what I wanted to do, but I didn't at all. So I came back and I needed a job. Um, I was in contact with some like recruiters and was saying to them, look, I've got this degree in actuarial science. It's obviously very mathematical and statistical, but there's no way I want to go into anything heavy maths or heavy statistics because it's driven me to insanity these past few years. So I want something like maybe with a bit of maths, but like manageable. Like I don't want it to be like the main focus. And they recommended me digital marketing. So that's what I ended up going into. I think between landing back in London and like my first day at the job, it was maybe like I want to say 2 or 3 weeks. It was like a super fast turnaround. So at least I think I have my degree to thank for that because it is a reasonably impressive degree.
That's good.
And like I did much better in the interviews than I thought. I thought I was going to be super super nervous and like just like completely just freak out and like not ever be able to get a job. But luckily it was fine. So yeah, I interviewed for a couple of places, and then yeah, the job that I eventually ended up in, like the first interview was just nice. Like the two people that I was interviewed by were just like lovely. I got a really good vibe from them, and what they were kind of describing sounded nice. And then the second interview, I interviewed with like the two like owners of the company. It was a really small company, I think about 25 people when I joined. And yeah, they also just were just nice. I got a good vibe.
Nice.
And
That's good.
one of them, I think I asked a question at the end because you're supposed to ask them questions at the end of an interview, and I think I asked like, like why do you like the job? Like how did you get into it? Like what do you enjoy about it? And he was just like so confused by the question, and like I later learned working with him that like he's not into it at all. He kind of got into it by accident, and anyway, it's funny. So like he's like not enthusiastic at all. So I thought, okay, well if even the owner is not like absolutely enthusiastic and all of this, then maybe I have a chance because it's not like a passion of mine. But I was like eager to learn and stuff. So yeah, I just got a good vibe, and they wanted to hire straight away. So it just felt right. So I ended up with them, and ended up staying there for like 3 years. The culture was really nice. All of that was really nice. The people there were nice. It was an office job, but it was good. It was like no overtime, like really supportive environment. It was pretty good. But the crisis came about I don't know, say a few months into starting that job, where I really started to feel like I've kind of reached the end of my life plan. I know like it sounds a bit stupid. I was like 22 or whatever, but like my whole childhood was
It doesn't sound stupid at all. I
the
get that.
direction was like go to uni from my family, and then after that I knew I wanted to go traveling. But like I'd never made a like, and in my mind, yeah, okay, from 16 I wanted to be an actuary, but I never actually like envisioned being an actuary. Like I never imagined myself, at at the desk being an actuary. I don't know. I think that's one of the signs that it was never going to be for me. But yeah, I'd reached the kind of end of my plan, and I started feeling really weird. And I remember having a conversation with my mum in the middle of this, saying like, I've reached the end of my life's plan. Like I'm so lost. Like what do I do now? I still feel like a child, but I'm like living like an adult. And yeah, just real confusion around that. Like feeling really young and not ready for adult life on the one hand, and then on the other hand, being in this job that I never expected to be in. And although I was quite enjoying it, I was like learning new things that was like manageable and enjoyable to learn, which was nice compared to the kind of struggles of my degree. And the people are nice and everything. But I just remember because the company hired basically all fresh grads, and I was hired alongside two other people, one of whom was a fresh grad, and I don't know what university he'd been in, but basically I was being a bit of a snob with the fact that I considered my degree to be more prestigious and harder than the people that I was working with, and yet we're on the same salary. And I struggled with that a lot, especially because people were talking about um, like the fun they had at uni and what a great time it was, and how they wish they were still there, or whatever, and all the how they just partied for 3 years and it was carefree and it was lovely, and that wasn't the experience that I had. And feeling like, what's the point? Like I did all that,
Mm.
and we've all ended up here earning the same money and the same job, and it felt like I struggled through all of that for nothing. So I was just like, oh, all of that struggle I've gone through, and I'm working a job that I don't really care about. I know it's not going to be a career. Like I already knew that. Like I wasn't passionate about digital marketing, and I didn't grow more passionate. um,
Mm.
yeah. So then I was like, oh, what am I going to do? Like, what's the rest of my life going to be? And like really real confusion about what am I going to do with the rest of my life, because I wasn't going to stay there the whole time. And yeah, just annoyed and a bit jealous of all the other
Like, where do we go
experiences.
next? Like, it's, yeah, I see what
Yeah,
you mean.
annoyed and kind of jealous at the experiences that other people seem to have had at university compared to mine, and that they've kind of gone into the job with less effort and all of that. But I ended up getting over that. Like I kind of have completely made peace with
Mm.
my choice of degree and where I went and what it led to. And yeah, I just had to get over it. Just did a bunch of thinking. I was like, it wasn't for nothing. Like it was an experience that helped show me that, the path that I thought I wanted to take wasn't what I wanted. And at least I learned it whilst I was still studying, and not after like 5 years of working or something. Because even if I had
Yeah.
gone on to be an actuary, you're going to be studying for like at least probably 5 years alongside working before you're like a fully qualified actuary. So like at least I hadn't, like, I don't know, gone down that path and then realized later on that
Mm.
even more time has been wasted. So yeah, and like the LSE where I went to, like
Yeah,
sometimes
that's true. That's a good way of
even
looking at it.
even when I've been traveling, like sometimes even like in a really remote place, I'll tell someone that I went to LSD and they'll be like, "Oh, LSD, like that's amazing!" Like some local guy in like the middle of Vietnam or something who, I don't know, happens to be interested in economics, and then yeah, so yeah, it's an experience I can say I've had and that I've done and that I can be proud of, that I made it through for the rest of my life. So yeah, I kind of made peace with it in the end, but it was a bit of a struggle to get there.
Mm. End of the day, you still did it. Like, there's so many people that could like be like, ah, you know what, this isn't for me. This course isn't for me. The people aren't for me. I hate all of this. Like, I'm just gonna chuck it in the pan. But the fact that you still stuck at it and you still went, you know what, I'm in here. I'm gonna see it through to the end is really, really, really admirable. I really respect that a lot. I know that if I was in a similar position, I'd be like, ah, fuck this. Like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna... this isn't for me. But like the fact, the determination and the skills you get from being determined are ones that will serve you for life. Like, there's no doubt about that.
Mhm.
Which is excellent. Which is excellent. So, from this kind of crisis, you were kind of not educated. What's the word I'm looking for? Inspired to go for the experiences, to go for the traveling, launch yourself out into the traveling. Came back, with what seems like a fresh sort of mindset, and hearing all your experiences, like hearing your life story from, from having a childhood, like a single mum childhood, or upbringing where it's tough and money's tight and it's not ideal. There's a lot of stress, a lot of like probably a lot of trauma in there, I imagine. Then obviously growing up, you had some like relationship issues. I know we didn't really dive into that. We spoke about them more last time, but it was like kind of abusive relationships through your teenage years into university. And obviously everything that you've just said about university, like traveling, kind of discovering. It sounds really cliched, but like discovering yourself while traveling.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. You do discover yourself. Um, which is understandable that for why you've kind of come to this point now where you're starting this life coaching business to kind of say like these are my experiences. Like, well, I don't know. You describe what brought you to the life coaching. I have my assumptions, but obviously you
Yeah.
have to know us.
Yeah, so yeah, like we mentioned it briefly before, but I was in what turned out to be a very toxic and pretty abusive relationship that started when I was 17, so before I went to university, and ended about, I don't know, 9 months before I ended up going to India. So yeah, being free of that relationship
Mm.
and then feeling like, okay, I'm gonna just. So I broke up with my ex in like February, and I was like, took a tiny bit of a while, but not too long to just get over it because I was like, I just felt free more than anything. Um, Kind of got myself together, thought
Mm.
I'm gonna have a great summer, and I did, and then quit my job and went traveling. Kind of had, yeah, my kind of second crisis after I quit my job and went traveling. It wasn't like the same as the first time, it was different, but I still had these feelings of like, okay, like I've broken away from this relationship. I've got a lot more freedom. Like I can start making big choices again without worrying about anyone else. Um, so that's why I went
Mm.
to India. And again, in my mind, had thought when I'm traveling around, I'm going to be thinking about what I want to do. I had it in my mind that I wanted to maybe work in the charity sector. I really wanted to give back. Whilst I was working in London, like I also started to do a bunch of volunteering, particularly with the homeless, um, in like a few different capacities that I'm not going to go into because it's a bit of a long story. But um, I really got this idea that maybe the charity sector would be for me because, yeah, I wanted to give back and I wanted to do good. Um, and then I don't know. I think I spoke to a few people whilst I was traveling
Mm.
about it, and maybe kind of got the impression that it wasn't all it was cracked up to be, and that it can be really, really stressful if you're in a small kind of charity, or it feels like you're not doing that much good. If you're in a big one, like everything kind of gets diluted, that your impact feels quite small when you're in such a big charity. Um, so yeah, and then
Mm.
had all my adventures that I briefly mentioned, came back to England, and I think it was when I was probably still in that 10-day quarantine with my family, and my mum was saying like, so what are you gonna do like now? Like, are you coming back to regular life? Like she was nagging me a lot through those kind of 18 months that I was away, especially when I was in India through COVID and stuff. Like, what are
Mm.
you doing? Like, why aren't you back here? And like, just come back and like, get another job and like be normal. And I was like, no, mum, I'm not ready for that. I'd rather stick it out in India than come back to the UK right now. Like, just let me be. Um, so when I eventually came back, she was really pressuring me of like, what are you doing now? Like,
It's interesting she said that though,
yeah,
with like the travel and stuff.
yeah,
Like she wanted you to travel. Was it like this is too much?
yeah, it was exactly that. It was like my whole childhood, she pushed me into travel, explore the world, don't have kids until you're ready, all of this stuff. And then as soon as I actually, I mean, before the travels before, not so much, but yeah, that kind of traveling to India and being away for so long, she really did realize like maybe she's pushed it too far and encouraged me too much, and I've taken it too seriously. Um, yeah, so she was really asking like,
I've pushed too hard.
what are you gonna do? Like, are you gonna get a job now, or like, what's the plan? I was like, I don't know what's the plan. Like, I still don't have a plan. I have no idea. And I don't know how we got onto it, but she mentioned briefly about like becoming a therapist and how she
Mm.
thought I would be well suited to that. And I was like, ah, nah, I'm too empathetic. Like, I think I would just take on people's problems too much. Um, and I would probably just burn out and, yeah, become
Mm.
overwhelmed by it. Um, and then, but then something in my mind was like, yeah,
Yeah, you
maybe.
know it's not for you.
I kind of like, maybe. So I started looking into it, um, but more into like counseling, or like, I knew that I didn't want to be dealing with anyone who's like really, really having a tough time, like, in the middle of a really deep depression or has gone through like extreme trauma. Like, I just didn't think that I'd be able to deal with that. But then I was like, well, maybe like a bit of counselling or like something. And then ended up finding out about life coaching. And yeah, it kind of fit the
Mm.
bill of what I was looking for. Like people don't normally go to life coaching in like the middle of an absolute tragedy, or like normally people are going to life coaching because something's not great in their life, they want a bit of a change, they want to make things better, but they're not quite sure how to. And it's much more forward focused rather than focusing on the past. So when you see a life coach, you're not going to be diving into your childhood traumas.
Mm.
You're going to more be looking at, okay, this is where I am, this is what I may be happy about and not happy about, this is where I want to be, I've no idea how to get there, what can we do? Or it could be that you have no idea where you want to go in the future and you want to just try and figure out something, like some direction to take. Yeah, and that sounded appealing. So I
Mm.
found,
It's almost like the post-healing process.
yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, like the ideal kind of life coach client is someone who's probably gone to therapy already and like sorted all of the real traumatic stuff out already, um, and then go to life coaching to kind of figure out the way forward.
Mm.
So I found this course online. I'm yeah open enough to say that it was cheap. It was like £17 for this online course, which was like 40 hours of video lessons and loads of resources. So it kind of takes you through the process of like for you of like figuring out your own values, figuring out what your own kind of life purpose is and what you're passionate about and how you want to be remembered. And it kind of takes you through the process as well as teaching you to teach other people to go through the process. So it did me a lot of good to figure out
Mm.
what I wanted to be, regardless of whether it was a life coach or not. Um, and then decided to just give it a go. I was like, well, I really enjoyed this. I think it's really powerful. Like I've got nothing else to do, so why don't I give it a go and try and set something up? So that's what I've done, and it's taken me a little while to kind of figure out the niche, which is what
It's
everyone
nice.
recommends you to do. Of like find a niche, find a niche. You can't just be a life coach and help everyone, because then no one's going to come to you. Like if you're just preaching about I can
Mm.
be a life coach and I can coach you, it's not really going to attract anyone. So the more I thought about it and the more I was creating content and like yeah doing all the stuff I've been doing on Instagram and a bunch of other stuff, I kind of narrowed in on the quarter life crisis being something which I definitely have my own experience with, and also something that is just a lot of people are going through it. And I think, I don't know for how long for, but maybe the last 5, maybe the last 10 especially years, I feel like people are having quarter life crisis way more than they ever have, because maybe before it was more common to have like that midlife crisis of,
Mm.
you've had your kids, you've been working for 20 years, maybe your kids are leaving home, maybe you're getting close to retirement, and then you realize, oh God, I've wasted my whole life. And what am I going to do now that my children aren't here to take care of and that I'm soon
Yeah.
not even going to have a job? Whereas now, I think people are, for whatever reason,
Well, like you had in
yeah, for whatever reason, it's kind of coming earlier. It's normally maybe when you're at
Wait, is that
university, maybe you've just started work, or maybe you've been working for a few years, and then you get the feeling of like, oh, is this it? And I don't know exactly all the reasons, but there's a bunch of different reasons why people are having it earlier. And I feel like there's not enough help out there, and I don't think it's taken as
mm.
seriously as it should be, because from my own experience, like it was a really scary place to be like, oh, is this adult life? Like, is this what it's going to be like for 40 years? Am I going to have to work a job I hate for 40 years? Am I going to feel unfulfilled my whole life? Like,
Mm.
yeah, it was a really scary time, and like confusing, and I wish I'd have had some help. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I've ended
It's
up
hard.
focusing on.
I think that's really beautiful. Like you said, I think a lot of people have midlife crisis. It's the same sort of ages as you said, 50s, midlife, where they're like, I've got a job, I've had my kids have moved out, I've got my house, I've got my car, I go on holiday once a year. Shit. Like, is this?
Mm,
I've reached that point, and obviously you had something similar with going to university, and you did it all, and you got your qualification, you got the job, and you're like, shit, like I'm here,
yeah.
I've got it. Like, what now? What? Like,
Mm,
which is that makes a lot of sense. And I definitely think it's something that you saying it out loud now. I'm like looking at people in my own life, and I'm like, that sounds very familiar. Like, I know
yeah.
people that have gone through similar things. I know people who are going through similar things,
Yeah.
which is definitely interesting.
Hmm.
That it's been really really nice to hear your story though. Where can people find you? Like all the stuff that you're doing.
So I've kind of spread myself out on a bunch of platforms whilst I was figuring out what was going to stick. So I'm on Instagram. It's wondering through life. So wondering.through.life. I'm posting on there really regularly. I've got a podcast as
Nice.
well, which is
I'll put
also,
links as well.
yeah, the podcast is also called Wandering Through Life. Um, and I've got a website, so katiemasoncoaching.com. And I'm in the process of launching like a
Nice.
dedicated 6-week program to do with quarter life crisis, which I'm kind of like I don't know, I completely lost my train of thought. The kind of working title, I guess, is Crisis
Okay.
to Curiosity. So you're not going to solve your quarter life crisis by having a few coaching sessions. You're not going to have suddenly figured out your whole life and have this whole great plan that you're going to follow through and it's going to be great. But I really think that through like the kind of 6-week program that I'm designing, it won't feel so scary anymore. You can turn that kind of fear and confusion into like curiosity and opportunity. That's what I'm aiming to do. Um, yeah, just figure out kind of what your values are. That's the main thing. Once you've figured out what your values are, you can start living them even in small ways straight
Hmm.
away. And you'll pretty quickly feel a lot better about the situation, I think, and kind of a mindset shift towards being curious. Yeah, maybe right now you're not in the place that you want to be, but if you know your values and you're curious about how you can start living more and more by your values, you're going to get somewhere good eventually. It's not going to be straight away. You're not going to, within a month or a few months have turned your life around. That's just impossible. But if you kind of keep in mind that, your 20s are a time for figuring things out, to be curious, to
Hmm.
try things, to fail at things, to go traveling, to, do whatever you want. Try, I don't know, 3 different career paths in a couple of years if you want. Like it's okay. Just be curious and slowly you'll
Have those
start feeling
options. Yeah.
like,
I really
you
like
know
that.
what, life is pretty good. Life can be really good. Life can be exciting and fun, and you don't have to just stick at something that you don't like if it's really making you miserable, and especially if it's making you miserable and you don't have time for things that make you happy.
Well, I really like the curiosity approach. I think you're onto a real winner there. When it like
Yeah.
we had someone on the show the other day, and he was like talking about all these like self help things and like how he stays motivated. He was like an ultra marathon runner, just like fully super motivated guy.
Mm.
And he was like, but none of this has to be boring. It's like it's exciting. Like you
Yeah.
can be excited, you can be curious, you can be like it doesn't have to be like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm going to get up and I'm going to find my values and find my routines and I'm going to get a job. And blah, blah, blah. It's like
Yeah.
it's actually like you're like you can do that. You're capable of doing it in a fun
Yeah.
way that's like you said, it's fun, it's exciting, it's brilliant. Like you get to wait. You're building a life that you want to live. Why would you not want to do that? And obviously, if you've got low self
Yeah.
esteem, low confidence, mental health problems, all that stuff, like yeah, it's difficult, but there are ways to grow from that. I think that's really nice what you're doing. It's cool, and I'm excited to see your journey as you grow it up and find your way through. I think it's exciting.
I'm really excited. I feel like I've really hit on something that I can work with now. Like I've been a few months where I've been like trying things out, like being curious, basically. Getting a little bit demotivated at times
Hmm.
when things haven't worked. But yeah, I feel like with this, I've got something really clear to work with, and I know there's a real need for it. Like you say, like people that are either have suffered it or are going through something like this at the moment, maybe. Um, like I am quite active on Reddit, and but casually, and you always see posts of people being like, is this it? Like, is this adult life? And then yeah, even like years ago I was seeing these and I kept being like, no, it doesn't have to be like that. You don't have to just work a job you hate, be tired, come home, maybe watch the TV for an hour, go to sleep, wake up, same thing. It doesn't have to be like that. So yeah, now already I'm already seeing like, there's been signs of this even for a few years where this is going to be exactly what I need to be doing.
That's really beautiful, and like you said, you can see the passion in your voice when you talk about it. That like you really have felt that thing inside you where you're like, "This is what I want to do, and this is the difference I want to make." And it's like something that you actually truly believe in, and it like fulfills your values, and obviously can make such a big difference to like the world. If someone listens to this and they're like, "Huh, you know, maybe I can try doing that. Maybe my life does feel like that." But you know, other people, you know, Katie herself has gone through that in many different ways. That's why I love talking about the life stories as well, because you can see how it all pieces together and like how that process has happened. And it's like, oh, and obviously everyone's life stories are different, but relatable in the sense that you can be like, oh, even recently I've been like, huh, is this it? And that's even with like goals and dreams and stuff that I want to do. I'm like, wow, I'm just sitting here at this computer like all the time, just doing stuff. Like, is this what it's going to be? So it's definitely relatable to like everybody. Well, Katie, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. I'll put links and everything in the descriptions as always, so people can get in contact with you. Thank you for your time. It's been awesome.
You're welcome. It's been a really nice chat. And if anyone is interested, and like the sound of coaching is a bit intimidating, on my website, and also if you go through Instagram, like there's a bunch of free stuff I've created for you to journal out your values and a bunch of stuff like that. So
yeah, there is definitely like a bit of a stigma there where it's like, oh, it sounds intimidating, like for sure. I get that. So yeah, I'll put links and stuff to your Instagram and website if anyone wants to check it out. Nice free resources. But yeah, it's been a pleasure. We finally got to get it done properly after
got to the end. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really nice. And it's good. It feels like it was so worth it, which is really, really lovely.
Yeah, it's been a long journey to getting this episode, but
it's been a long journey. No, it's been an absolute pleasure though.
Thanks for having me on. I've really enjoyed our chat, even if it's been a bit stressful.
No, it's all good. It's all good. You'll be amazed with like what a little bit of editing can do. Like it'll be seamless at the end. But yeah, until we chat again next time, and then normally we just do like a little wave.
I hope so. It's going to be a tough one.
No, it'll be fine. It's exciting to see how it all plays out. But yeah, normally just do a little wave at the end for everybody. See you next time, guys. Bye.